Halo Infinite is 343 Industries' best attempt at capturing the magic of Bungie's original game, taking a more classic approach to the characters, the world, the story, and more importantly, the gameplay. Halo Infinite is both a love letter to the past and a new look towards the future. Taking place a few years after the Halo 5 Guardians and shortly after Halo Wars 2, most of that off screen, Infinite starts off with the Master Chief floating in space, having been defeated in a devastating battle atop Zeta Halo, the game's new open world setting. Rescued by a nameless pilot, the Master Chief wakes up, making his way to the surface and retrieves a new AI with the purpose of imitating Cortana and locking her down, called the Weapon. Together, Chief, the Weapon, and the pilot embark on a new adventure to stop the Banished from uncovering the Halo Ring's secrets while meeting new foes and demystifying the sudden disappearance of Cortana.
But gee, this is all her fault.
It isn't Cortana. Tell him.
Ever since Bungie left the Halo franchise in the hands of 343 Industries, fans have been divided on the direction that the latter has taken the franchise in. Halo 4 was a radical departure from the simpler design of the previous games, and Halo 5's campaign was, in my opinion, an absolute mess, although quite ambitious. Halo Infinite takes things back to the basics. Some would say too basic. Taking huge inspiration from the second level of Halo Combat Evolved, the game is in many ways a spiritual reboot while closing off the story from the last two games. At the same time, Infinite is the start of a new saga, with new characters and enemies with ties to the original trilogy as well as the Halo Wars games. Let's start with the big one then, the open world. Halo campaigns have always been known for their linear nature, and Infinite stands in stark contrast to those. However, Infinite is not an open world game in the traditional sense. Players are given the option to rush through the main campaign should they choose to do so, with the open world activities sitting there merely for passive progression. There are two reasons why I ever found myself playing through those passive activities. The gameplay is fun and the rewards you get are genuinely helpful during the campaign's slight difficulty spikes. In total, finishing the game took me around 23 hours, with maybe 4 or 5 of that lost in the side missions. That's quite good, and to my delight quells my concerns with the franchise going in the new, often fatigued direction. So how linear is Halo Infinite? A decent amount, at least for the main story. The game's opening 2 hours are extremely linear, with a familiar start as the previous games. After an hour or two, Zeta Halo opens up. Most of the missions can be broken into two types, purely linear with some light traversal. It's usually a combination of both, making some missions relatively long based on how the players perform in the open world segment. So a mission can begin in the following way. Travel through the map to select locations for objectives. Enter a structure, follow the linear path, then exit the structure back to free roam. There's a good balance between the two, making it so that players can tackle the campaign in any way they like. The incentive for completing side missions is passive, so playthroughs can take anywhere between 15 hours to 30. However, I found myself compelled to do side quests which included taking over forward operating bases, called FOBs.
Hit that terminal and we'll make it official. Fob captured. One more foothold for the UNSC.
Following bounties,
HVT eliminated. Now take out the rest of the squad.
controlling strongholds, collecting audio logs, collecting Spartan cores which can be used to upgrade Chief's abilities.
Nice work. We're 2 for 2 on maintenance depots.
When unlocked, the FOBs also act as fast travel points, which can come in pretty handy as main missions are usually placed apart by long distances. The FOBs also allow the Chief to craft and deploy weapons along with vehicles. Doing side activities like taking on bounties will unlock new higher tier weapons which can be equipped as the FOBs. The FOBs are essentially pit stops to deploy new and classic vehicles such as the Warthog, the Mongoose, and new ones like the Razorback.
Hey, Chief. I'm on my way with that Warthog you requisitioned.
Once captured, the FOBs are populated with UNSC Marines, who will follow Chief on vehicles to missions. You can also rescue captured Marines across the map. However, unlike the original game, don't expect to see many biomes or different environments. The entire game takes place either in lush outdoors or inside Forerunner facilities. Also, say goodbye to specific vehicle-heavy missions. Thanks to the free-form open nature of the game, no mission will ever force Master Chief to stick to using a specific weapon or vehicle. That decision blends everything together, and as a result, the game loses some of the uniqueness in its mission design. Unfortunately, there is no way to replay missions from the campaign, and there is no way to save the game either. There is a load game functionality though, so it's unclear whether the absence of different save states or mission replay is only restricted to the review build. That's quite possible, as the review build save progress won't be carrying over to the final game. The core gameplay in Halo Infinite is better than ever, with the grappling hook being the best decision 343 could have ever made. While it may look quite basic, the grappling hook serves many purposes, all of which make combat and traversal a ton more fun and engaging. The grappling hook can be used to propel Chief forward, grab weapons and equipment from far away, get the Chief closer to enemies, and much more. Other than that, the combat is classic Halo, with the dual weapon system and a select number of grenade types and equipment at your disposal. As you progress through the story, you'll unlock new equipment types such as thrusters, deployable shields, and a threat sensor. You can also just tap a button to send a pulse around your immediate surroundings to see objective markers, weapons, and vehicle outlines and more. Battles in Halo Infinite can get tense pretty fast, so all of that equipment is going to come useful. I just wish that switching between equipment on a controller was easier, as I lost many fights due to animation switching and a small lag between switching grenades or equipment. That's why I would switch to keyboard and mouse for the more intense sections, and controls for that by default are pretty good. Also, whenever you're watching this footage and you see the camera shaking very violently, please know that I just switched to the keyboard and mouse because I died a lot while playing with the controller.
They were persistent.
You can also switch between different controller profiles as well as customize it completely, which is neat. And no, you can't plug in a PS4 or PS5 controller and expect that to work on the PC port. I know, I tried. Halo's enemy designs along with their AI has always been really good, and you'll be fighting familiar enemies and their variants in Infinite. Sure, there are some enemy types that basically boil down to discount monitor like flying robots, but the enemy variety is intrinsic. Take the brutes for example. There are multiple types. The standard brutes are fine, but then there are charging brutes, and some higher variants of those. Infinite's combat makes it so that standing behind a shield is instantly punishing, which is where the grappling hook comes in handy. You'll be flying around the battle arena, grabbing grenades, flammable canisters, and throwing them around quite a lot. While that's fun, it's also quite hard if you ever find your shield to be depleted, at which point you'll be using a grappling hook to take cover and just run from enemies. I died quite a lot in Infinite, and I was playing on the normal difficulty. A lot of those deaths were due to the lack of my ability to quickly move out of the way and find cover when my shields were down. The same goes for the more focused fights in the boss battles, all of which feel unique thanks to the different skills that the bosses possess. Some will just charge at you, some will need to have the shields taken down, some will be invisible for the majority of the battle. Each boss fight requires a somewhat different tactic, and that's fun. At its core, the combat and traversal are simple but great, which is why picking fights at random outposts never got tiring. I played the game on my PC, which is equipped with an AMD Ryzen 7 3700X CPU, an Nvidia GeForce RTX 2060 Super, and 32GB of RAM. Compared to the console space, my PC is relatively close to what the Xbox Series X offers in terms of pure hardware. I played Halo Infinite at 1080p with various graphical settings being a mix of high and ultra. With those settings, I saw frame rates reach 100 plus FPS in indoor levels and just hovering around 60 to 70 in the outdoors. That frame rate would drop to the mid 50s when the action ramped up, leading me to lower certain passive settings to medium. That sounds fine, but there are some core issues here that prevent the game from being as smooth as it can be, and that has nothing to do with the game being too demanding on modern hardware. The main issue is that animations for certain elements run at a non-native rate, which is below 60 FPS. So regardless of how much hardware you throw at the game, it always feels jittery. Camera motion, lip sync, Chief's combat animations such as reloading and throwing grenades are below 60 FPS, making smooth gameplay impossible. These issues can and should be fixed by 343 easily. And then there are other issues such as the checkpoint saves, which can occur at inconsistent times. One time in the first mission, I got stuck in a save point loop right before falling to my death, and that whole mission required a restart, instantly destroying the last 20 minutes or so of my progress. Then in the larger missions, checkpoint saves can occur seemingly at random, so dying can either boot you back to the start or continue from a more fair point. As far as bugs go though, I never ran into any. This is a pretty polished experience if you can look past those certain oddities in the performance.
Are you okay?
Alright then, what about the story? I've rambled on about the game's combat and traversal and everything else for a long time, but the one thing that a lot of Halo fans are looking forward to is the story and the new characters. I have to say, I love the relationship between the main trio, with the chemistry between Master Chief and the weapon bringing a smile to my face every time they were speaking to each other. The Chief has always been a man of few words, but due to the innocent and inquisitive nature of the weapon, he emotes quite a lot here. If the Master Chief was always known for his sick one-liners, now he spouts two-liners, but still in his signature deadpan way.
Banished.
Affirmative.
They smell even worse than I imagined.
You can smell them.
Well, an array of sensors in your armor can, and I analyze the input. You smell fine, by the way.
The Chief's relationship with Cortana has always been a staple of the series, and his new relationship with the weapon is just as good, if not better. Most of that thanks to Jen Taylor's amazing voice acting.
What were those flying things?
New. Dangerous.
And Despondent Pyre?
New. Potentially dangerous.
See, you can be optimistic.
The pilot is a much needed human element, being an untrained UNSC member who grounds the Chief's war with the Banished. He is the voice of reason, and the evolution of his rocky relationship with the Chief is at the heart of this story, along with the weapon.
Everyone trying to kill you?
It kinda seems like it. Oh, wait! You're being sarcastic! He's fun, I like him.
Am I dead already? I must be. I mean, this is a punishment, right? Yep, this is death.
The antagonists though could have been better. Escharum, Atriox and the Harbinger are intimidating but underwhelming. Atriox's presence is felt throughout the game, but don't expect him to be a big part of this campaign. Speaking of which, as a Halo game that is geared towards welcoming newcomers, all of them will be lost in trying to figure out just who the hell Atriox and the Banished are. I've only played the mainline Halo games, so the sudden importance of Atriox from the Halo Wars spin-offs threw me off. Of course, fans of the series will no doubt be keen to know what happened after the end of Halo Wars 2, but that's not the focus of this game. Unless, you just find all of the audio logs and they somehow explain everything that has happened between Halo 5 and Halo 6. A lot of the audio logs that you find in the open world of Zeta Halo do fill out key pieces of information that should have been given out in, say, a cutscene or maybe another mission, but regardless, that's just how the game is. That's a major factor in making the conclusion of this game feel quite anticlimactic. But then there's Cortana. The mysterious disappearance of Cortana is a driving factor for Chief, and the resolution of that storyline is handled well enough. With that said, the jump from Halo 4 to Halo 5 and now to Infinite is quite rocky. Each time the central threat has been changed. Each time, 343 seems to switch its goals. The only narratively consistent thread is Cortana's rampancy and eventual betrayal. When all was said and done, Infinite's story left me going, wait, that's it? That's the whole game? That's not to say there aren't any big major revelations in Infinite, because there are some, but there's a reason why the game isn't called Halo 6. And it's apparent that the campaign in Infinite is a starting point for 343 Industries. It passively concludes the story from the previous games, mainly Cortana's betrayal, and sets up a new saga for the future. At the center of Halo's new future are Master Chief, the pilot, the weapon, and yes, they do get their own names in the game itself, but I'm not gonna spoil that. And then there are the Banished and a new mysterious race which I won't be spoiling here. With Halo Infinite being more of a platform, it may be that 343 Industries will continue story in some form of expansion, like Bungie does with its Destiny games. In either case, I don't want to see fans waiting for another 5 years for the sequel, but when that does arrive, it's clear that it's going to be a very different experience like this one, which welcomes new and old fans alike.